it was very interesting, as you mentioned, that now recently UAE has gotten into the grey list area, and obviously a lot of people are wondering the implication of such a move. I mean, as people, most people would know, grey list is essentially it doesn't have the force of law. So it's up to the various country how they want to implement this. And what the recommendation in the grey list is the fact that any country that's on that list, the grey list, they will the other countries will have to do an assessment or whether or not they meet their exacting standards, or they have to do their enhanced due diligence. So from our perspective, clearly the fact that UAE now is on the grey list gives us pause to deal with when we are dealing with UAE-based entities, whether or not they have, for instance, comply with their travel rule, whether they have their AML CFT standards in place in terms of drawing out the screening process of their entities. So we will have to do an assessment of their regulatory processes and their AML controls to see if they are in compliance, notwithstanding that they are on the FATF grey list. So the implication of that clearly is requiring more work for us in terms of making those assessments from our regulatory and compliance perspective, to understand if the people that we are dealing with out of the UAE is in fact complying with AML and CFT standards. Travel rule is now becoming the main topic, and probably a lot of people are saying 2023 will be the year where travel rule will finally get implemented. And I think, as most people know, there's only a handful of countries today that have, first of all, introduced travel rule as part of their regulatory or legal requirement, and secondly, enforcing that requirement. And Singapore is being one of the first few countries around the world that started to implement travel rule. As we know, they make it compulsory and mandatory for all of the existing crypto license holders to comply with travel rule. In addition to that, we have countries like in South Korea that made it mandatory, and therefore you can only deal with intermediaries that are regulated. Therefore, you can only send value asset transfer, because the requirement for travel rule is pursuant to a VA transfer. So you can only send a VA transfer to another regulated entity. So if the entity is not regulated, therefore you are not allowed to send to them. So there are huge implications. There are different application and implementation of the travel rule in different countries. It leads to some of these sunrise problems that we're seeing down the road. But I think there's a lot of hopes down there, in the sense that we have been working with, we've been very fortunate to be part of the working committee together with the FATF. Mm-hmm. So we have been engaging with FATF and all of the other service providers down the road, and there seems to be a lot more collective discussion or dialogue that's happening now. Every couple of months, we are being invited to this plenary session to discuss some of the updates and feedback. And what we've seen down the road is that there has been a lot of improvement in the engagement process in terms of some of the practical suggestions in terms of how do you comply with certain things. So we hope to put that into place in some of the working groups that we're working with across in the countries around the world. So there's been a lot of progress, so to speak. So our biggest concern is the fact that there has been lack of harmonized application of the FATF recommendation across the board. And I think MiCA is obviously have their own way of looking at it, because it has gone through the European Parliament before it got passed. So obviously they've taken on board some of the European consideration, and some of them obviously are quite different from the application in some of the other countries. If I may use an example, in Singapore we have this requirement for a de minimis rule, whereby below a certain threshold, below that you only have to send minimal amount of travel rule required information, while anything above, then you have to send additional information. While for instance in the EU, in MiCA, they are proposing either to do away with it completely or to set a very low threshold. I think it was about 800 to 1,000 euros as a minimum requirement. So these are some of the considerations that we have to consider in terms of the application of the rules might differ from MiCA versus, say, here in Singapore or in Korea. And you have to find some sort of a harmonized standard in allowing the service provider to allow them to exchange those required information pursuant to the travel rule.